Good afternoon and welcome to the Penguin Parlor. This is Jennifer Reynolds, your host this afternoon. We are going to be looking in depth for the next 15 minutes at an amazing place within the Antarctic arena, and that is South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. In the past, we have looked at Antarctica 101, an introduction to the continent. We've looked at a typical day in Antarctica, if anything can ever be called typical in this part of the world. In the Penguin Parlor, I've also introduced you to fly sail options and how these work in late January and February and into March, where travelers have an opportunity to fly over the renowned Drake Passage. We also looked at November and December departures, particularly as it applies to this year, with some incredible opportunities that exist and still exist within the peninsula throughout Thanksgiving and even over Christmas time. One of my little presentations in the Penguin Parlor was also about my little friend, the Greg Mortimer, an exquisitely beautiful vessel that carries just 120 people to the Antarctic and landing 100 people at a time in the peninsula. However, our time this afternoon, our time together in the Penguin Parlor, is to talk about a more unique place, somewhere that is a little less traveled within the Antarctic arena, and that is called South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. However, let me reintroduce myself to you. My name is Jennifer Reynolds. I was born and raised in Canada. I worked and lived on cruise ships for many years and have always worked in the travel industry. Tampa, Florida is home for me, where I make my home with my little kitty cat, Alfie. And it was my husband, oceanographer and explorer, Dr. Stuart Nelson, who introduced me to a little bit more in-depth styles and types of travel. And I ultimately gave up umbrellas in my drinks for places that have a little bit more substance and explorer in places. I do maintain a fairly active social page that is Jennifer Reynolds Travels on Facebook. And I've begun to post more things up to a YouTube page, useful things that you and your travelers may find helpful. But I will admit it does sometimes take a little bit of energy and a lot of focus to stay focused on the topic when you're getting distracted by wonderful little critters like my Alfie down there at the bottom. But Tampa is home for me. I was born and raised in Canada and still remain a little shocked at how impacted I've been by Antarctica, and I have become what is called an Antarctic ambassador. I will always lead with my knowledge of the continent, and I will always leap, and that means share my love of the place. I will educate you, I will advocate for it, and I will protect it, because the Antarctic is the largest ice sheet on Earth. And I am very, very proud of being an Antarctic ambassador. But this place is a little bit complicated, and we're going to try to break down some of the myths for you. The season is November, December, January, February into March. It is the summer season here. December 21st is the longest day of the year. And I'm fond of saying the only mistake that you will ever make is not going. But what is considered to be the Antarctic is all land and ice shelves that are below the 60th parallel. And you see those identified with the red arrows. Anything within that parameter is considered to be part of the Antarctic. Well, in our world, we're primarily going to visit the Antarctic Peninsula. Coming from Ushuaia or Argentina, and coming into the first area, which would be the peninsula of Antarctic, being fortunate enough to go a little bit deeper and visit to the Antarctic Circle, or to number 3, where we're going to dig into a little bit further today, South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. This is why people come to the Antarctic Peninsula, this place that is 98% covered in snow. So very monochromatic. The only color you'll ever see is your jackets and your hats as you explore in the peninsula. But we're going to look at something a little bit different today. We're going to look at the South Georgia and the Falkland Islands, which are considered to be sub-Antarctic islands. You'll also hear the Sandwich Islands also referred to here as well. And this is a really neat geographic formation. It's a submerged ridge or mountains below, and it's actually called the Scotia Ridge. The island itself, if you're looking at South Georgia, it's just over 100 miles long and about 22 miles wide. In fact, at its narrowest place, where Ernest Shackleton would ultimately spend some time, it's just over a mile wide. It's ice-free. And Cape Disappointment at the bottom end, you see there pointed out by the blue arrow. This was originally in 1775 when Captain Cook came here and thought he'd discover another continent. And in fact, he discovered a fjord, and it's called now Cape Disappointment. But the opportunity to get out to South Georgia is a very, very unique experience. There's about 60 landing sites on the island itself. No one lives here. There are no regularly scheduled flights in. The only way that you're coming in is by boat. And it's not an easy ride to get in from Elephant Island. It's about 50 hours worth of sailing. And that also depends on how kind Mother Nature is. But South Georgia also fares very greatly in the story of Ernest Shackleton, and I strongly recommend anyone who has an interest in this part of the world to read the story of Ernest Shackleton. Biosecurity is taken very secure here and very seriously. It is in the peninsula, but doubly so when you get over to South Georgia. This is one of the most unique, unbelievable places in the world. That is not in ice informed like in the peninsula. It is ice free. You'll find geographic formations here that just are really mind-blowing. And as I mentioned earlier, it is part of the submerged ridge, which is part of the Scotia Ridge, which is what gives it such a unique and different topography. Landings ashore here are exactly what you see, and you do see some green in the background. That's always a key for you in looking at any photos of Antarctica. If you see green, you know that you're not on the peninsula. That would not be found where 98% of the ice exists. The water is magnificent. The scenery is extraordinary. Things change so incredibly fast. It's here where you find the colonies of king penguins on South Georgia. The colonies of birds and seals that you see here are some of the greatest, largest, and most approachable concentrations of wildlife in the world. And you will never be quite the same once you've had a chance to come ashore in a place like this, Gold Harbor, Salisbury Plain, St. Andrews, or Fortuna Bay. Glaciers that are now retreating that our expedition leaders have seen over the years and watched the topography change and seen these recede. While we were here on this beach, and this was at Gold Harbor, this particular glacier gave off a very, very large calving. And we had been out kayaking in the water, not in any dangerous level close to it, but close enough to be able to get a real look at the magnificence of Mother Nature. It is here where you will see many more species of the seals. You can get up close. Of course, you're going to keep your distance from them. It's that greenery that you're going to see. But it's the seals and the elephant seals that you'll find here. 30 million breeding birds, including 7 million penguins, 250,000 albatrosses. It's ridiculous the amount of wildlife that are on these islands in South Georgia and the Falklands. I mentioned Salisbury Plain and Gold Harbor, St. Andrews Bay and Fortuna. You can see our ship in the distance, a Zodiac coming ashore. The ease of the landing that we were able to make. And these are some of the areas that you will be able to get into to South Georgia, maybe one of them, two of them, possibly three of them, depending on how much time you're going to spend here. When one says that there are penguin viewings in every direction, one isn't joking. This is one of those mornings where we did a little bit of a pivot on the ship and got up and went ashore without breakfast. It was a little bit dark as we went ashore and explored, came back to the ship, and hot chocolate was served, a breakfast was there. The energy on the ship was absolutely palatable that day. We all knew that we had experienced something absolutely exquisite that so few people in the world will ever, ever experience. South Georgia and the area of Grytviken is somewhere where you will likely go into. You can do a small hike. If you're fortunate, you'll cover some of the very same tracks that Shackleton did. But remember, when Cook came in here initially, he reported the amazing wildlife, the seals, the birds, the whales, and that word got out to the whalers who came here and set up camp in Grytviken, who were extremely effective in wiping out a significant portion of the seals and the whales in this part of the world. And it was only in the 1960s that whaling was stopped. No one lives here now. These are museums, and these are a British overseas territory. And I will share with you, it is also the resting place of Sir Ernest Shackleton, or the Boss. An absolutely magnificent story. South Georgia, Peggotty Bluff, Jason Harbor, Grytviken, Gold Harbor, Salisbury Plain, Pryon Island. There are 30 to 40 different visitor sites you can get here. Much depends on Mother Nature. What I can assure you is that you will earn your way to South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. I mentioned earlier, from Elephant Island to South Georgia was over 50 hours of sailing. To get from South Georgia over to the Falkland Islands as well could be between 20 and 30 hours. But remember, it's here, you're in an area of water, the Drake Passage. This is the area where so much biodiversity comes together in terms of the oceans. My husband would call this a gigantic buffet where everything comes together. And it's the peel dolphins and hourglass dolphins. We were squealing with delight. You can recognize the hourglass dolphin here with the upper and lower stretches. The peel dolphin that jumped right out of the water as we were having luncheon. A chance to explore also the Falkland Islands. Yes, there is a population in the Falkland Islands. Over on Stanley, where several thousands of people live, not guaranteed that you will go into Stanley. There is so much to see over here. And again, the reason for coming to South Georgia and the Falkland Islands are for the unique wildlife. The penguins that you will see, the rockhoppers, the macaronis, the king penguins, Magellanic penguins. But there again is that greenery and that scenery. And I can tell with one very quick look that we're no longer on the peninsula, and even by the shrub grass that we're now on the Falkland Islands. I can also tell by the species of penguins, by the rockhoppers, and how these little critters love to come in and take over the nests of the cormorants, which make these conical shaped nests. You see it pointed there on the left. And these penguins that exist in so few places around the world. In our last few minutes together, look at these beautiful beaches and the areas that you will be able to explore. The species of birds, the skuas, the albatrosses, the sheafbill, the pipits, the caracaras. Believe me, you thought you didn't like birds, and you do, until you grab a pair of binoculars and start catching on and seeing a petrel and the prions, and realizing how unique and diverse and truly exquisite that this part of the world is. It's all about flexibility. It's all about time. It's all about managing it well. You can do a full itinerary of 23 days and do the Antarctic Peninsula and get down to the Circle and over to South Georgia Island. Or maybe one would like to shorten it up a little and include a flight component. Remember, there's no airport on South Georgia. There is on the Falkland Islands. And for people who have been to the Antarctic Peninsula before, many, many go back to simply experience an in-depth South Georgia and Falkland experience because it's so entirely different than anywhere else. But like anywhere else in the world, travel is all about people. It's all about those that lead us, that show us, that experience things with us. And I thank you for experiencing the Penguin Parlor with me this afternoon. My name is Jennifer Reynolds. Every Thursday or every second Thursday, we're going to get together at 3 o'clock and record a little session on something different about the places that we at Aurora Expeditions go to. And today our journey took us to South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. Where we're going coming up next, I don't know. Watch our online channels, we'll share that information. But in the meantime, I'm Jennifer Reynolds. Thank you for joining me at the Penguin Parlor this afternoon. Thank you for thinking Antarctica and expedition travel. And thank you for thinking Aurora Expeditions.